Welcome to Annie Hyman Pratt, the author of The People Part, her first book. But Annie is also a very, very long-term and successful veteran of the business. She was a CEO at a very young age and has thus moved into being the CEO of her own company, which is a consultancy that helps business run even better than before. So Annie, tell us about The People Part and tell us what was the impetus for writing the book.
Okay, awesome. First, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. The impetus for writing the book was I had so many people ask me to recommend leadership books. And I found that I had a really hard time doing that, like kind of leadership books or business basics. And I could recommend sort of a book here and there that would cover just part of what I thought was important. And so I wrote this book to cover it. Like when people ask me, what do I really need to know about being an entrepreneur, a business leader, and especially somebody who's going to be in a business that's growing, where they're taking it from one level to the next level. And so, and I wrote it because I have some really strong feelings about how business works, and including that the people part is just incredibly important.
And these are tried and true methods that you've worked with your clients on for years, right?
Yes, for years and years.
Amazing. Yeah. So tell us your background. I mean, you have a very unique and interesting background, and the way that you cut your teeth in business was very different than a lot of us.
Yeah. I was fortunate. We had a family business. My parents started the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. And for people in the United States, or actually in some other countries too, you might know it, especially if you have visited the Southern California region, where we have a lot of stores. The Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf originally was a gourmet coffee store my parents started in the 60s, where you would come in and buy beans, beans to take home and make coffee, grind at home. And over time, in the late 80s and the early 90s, the business changed in a really big way. And we had what I call the beverage revolution, where instead of buying beans to take home and make, people were coming in and buying all kinds of fancy Italian drinks, right? The espressos and the cappuccinos and the lattes. And we had a very famous drink called the ice blended mocha. We sort of invented that whole category. And so I was in high school working in the stores. And then in the very early 90s, I had graduated from college. I actually was working at Price Waterhouse, and my dad had a big heart issue. And so I ended up coming back to the family business at that point with a lot of wind at my back, right? Because the beverages were on fire. And so then I grew that business a lot, took it from 7 stores to over 70 stores. And we did some overseas licensing. And then we sold the business, or I should say my parents sold the business a bit unexpectedly. And after that, I did a lot of interim executive roles because I didn't know what I should do next. And so I did a lot of interim executive roles, got to see all different kinds of businesses, and found a common theme that businesses could have great systems and process. They could have a really good strategy. They could have a good balance sheet. But if the people part wasn't working, the business wasn't going to work. And and then I've kind of been a closet anthropologist, I feel like, in a lot of my life. And so always interested in the people part. And then at some point when my life was actually going through a lot of changes, I found myself in a program called the University of Santa Monica, and have a master's degree, California master's, in something called spiritual psychology. And it was such a great psychology program that for me was so eye-opening about how we relate inside ourselves, and how much that impacts business. And so after that, I started to work a lot more with companies as a consultant, a little bit less about the interim management and a lot more consulting. And yeah, and now we have a group program that develops leaders of businesses. And we do a lot of what we call private consulting, of kind of enterprise engagements where we work with whole teams.
Amazing. Amazing. Congratulations on that journey, because that is a really interesting journey
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so from your experience, you created, the concept of this book, which is the 7 agreements.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about just the overarching idea of creating these 7 agreements, and then we'll dig into each one as we go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So when I first started working with teams and people, going all the way back to the coffee bean, I was always kind of interested in like, well, what makes this work? Like, how do people really work together? And I found that when people could make agreements, like really that when they could be on the same page for what they were going for and what each person was going to be doing, when those agreements were explicit, it just worked 10,000% better. Because without that, like if somebody gave a command or if there was an agreement that was kind of like half-baked, things went wrong all the time. And so as I went along, I really found that healthy businesses, ones that are working really well, that take advantage of humans, run on agreements, and everything's an agreement. Meaning, like when I come into a company, if I started a company, my role is the first agreement I make with a company. And if I'm on a project team, then the project plan is our agreement. So it's both implicit kind of company norms as well. Those are all kind of understood agreements. And then we have the ones that are super explicit, like a delegation, right? Like, if I'm going to delegate to somebody and give them a new thing to do, we've got to have a pretty explicit agreement about it.
Right.
And yeah. And so the thing about agreements that it took me a while to figure out, because I really do think of them as like the mechanism of teamwork. That's when people are most healthy, is when I'm free to make an agreement I can keep and you are too. So as I was working with that, it really came to understand that agreements are, in business especially, they're not promises, because we can't promise an outcome. And we can't even promise that we're definitely 100% going to do what we said we were going to do, because things can change. It's like making a promise in sports, right? Like even the best basketball players can't promise to make a free throw.
Right.
They're going to do their best. But so I think of agreements as very much about setting intentions. It's like what we intend to do in the situation. So if the situation changes, we may have to do something different.
Right.
If the situation doesn't change, we may have an error. And that's okay. It's like business is like sports, and that people make errors all the time. We can handle that as long as we keep getting onto the same page, as long as we keep talking about what we're doing now, what's changed, what we're doing now. And so I just find agreements as the way to think about teamwork. And they're a process, not a promise.
Like, they're truly collaboration in its most authentic state, right?
100%. Yes. That's the whole point. Is like each of us in business, we're operating with so many agreements, but we need to be for the things on our plate, we need to be able to think, can I do this new thing? What else will it impact? And I have to be able to raise that, right? So that we can collaborate and talk about, hey, look, I already have a full plate. Maybe, we can talk about what I might be able to take off. Is this a better priority? Let's talk about this. Yeah.
Yes. So let's dig into each of them. right?
Right.
I mean, I love the first one, self-leadership. I mean, that is really, really important. So let's
Yes.
talk about that. Tell me all about what
Yeah.
you think of as self-leadership.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yep. Yep. So we all agree to be in self-leadership instead of self-protection. That's what the agreement is all about. And self-leadership is where we are able to show up in a good place, in a place free of our emotional reactivity. It doesn't mean that we don't have emotions. It means, though, that when we have emotions, we don't have to act on them. Because psychology has come such a long way, I think, especially in the last few decades, about neuroscience. What we know is that our emotions, especially the ones around threats and fear, is based in the amygdala, which sits on top of our spinal cord. And it's the thing that where our senses hit first. So we are wired to go to see threats and go into self-protection. But that is terrible for business because in business, like we actually, most of the time are really not under any real threats. We're under psychological threats. Like I might not achieve the goal. I might say the wrong thing in a meeting or something like that, but nobody's nobody's going to be dying from taking a business risk. And so because of that, we need to learn to regulate those emotions. If we don't, those emotions end up taking over and then we can't think. That's when we lose our, in the worst cases, we lose control, like happened last night on the Oscars.
Oh my gosh, that was
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that was actually kind of a great example of Will Smith going into self-protection. And in his case, protection of himself and his family, but he
Yes.
had a giant emotional response. And and so he could no longer think. If he were thinking, I don't believe he would have made that choice.
Exactly. And it's funny, you write about, and we talk about it with our coaching clients all the time, the power of the pause,
Yes.
right? And moving from that amygdala to
yes, to your frontal lobe.
Yeah.
This is where your executive function is. This is what's amazing about human beings, by the way. Like, this is where our creativity is. This is where we can, put a million details together and come up with something really great. This is why we work with humans, is this part.
Yes.
So, so we all, every human needs to learn to regulate their emotions. And in business, I think it's tricky and it's getting harder and harder because businesses are under more stress. Change, and I believe that's because change is so fast now.
Yes.
Right. Like the world changes faster and faster. So unlike sports, kind of the game keeps changing in business.
Yes.
You have to keep learning the new game. And that is stressful. So we do have to learn to operate under stress without going into that place. And we need to rely on each other to do it too. Because self-protection is, doesn't usually involve slapping somebody, but not usually, but it does often involve blaming other people, criticizing them, ignoring them, minimizing, self-criticism. That's a very common, especially for high achievers, very common emotional response. It's not better than blaming somebody else. Yeah. So, sometimes people think of self-blame as like, I'm taking responsibility, but it's not true because self-blame leaves you in a place of isolating. It changes your perspective. It narrows it to something really tiny and you can't think anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We need to let ourselves off the hook.
Yeah. And you're moving out of that creative, powerful part of your brain.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we think it's just so important. I think that, the biggest productivity waster in business today is people spinning in their own heads.
Especially at home. right?
Yes.
Even more so now because of the hybrid workforce.
Oh,
There's
yes.
more time to spin at home, right? In your head.
Exactly. In your head. Exactly. Yeah. To misread emails, you don't get a chance to connect with those people. So it can like kind of fester and get its own story going, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's hard.
Exactly. But agreement number 2, which is about defining those outcomes, really helps that,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And that the thing that I love about business, and that agreement is we define and align on outcomes, right? Desired outcomes. And what I love about business is it's not personal. Like business is a game of goal achievement, right? So achieving goals for your clients and customers, achieving financial goals, achieving maybe reputational goals, right? Making new products, changing the world. Okay, great. All of that is about what we're here to do together. And so business is not personal. It's not like I'm coming together to to be all focused on me. And that's really good news. Because when we have something bigger than ourselves, we're able to drop that self-conscious self-protection and just be with the other team members of like, we're going for this outcome.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest complaints that I hear teams and leaders make is when they complain about we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what we're going for. I know it makes entrepreneurs crazy because they're like, I feel like I talk about it every day.
Right.
But we have to make it really clear. It's like we have to make sure there's a really strong meeting of the minds, that the people working towards the goal have the full picture of what it looks like. Because without that, they can't do problem solving. They can't think. It's just so important. And without being clear about outcomes, you can't align. You don't, people run in different directions. And one of the ways I say it is without defining the outcome, everybody has a different outcome in their head.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
mine will look different than yours if we don't get really clear about what should it look like.
I mean, it's this collective meaning making, right? Where you're really helping everyone on the team march to the same beat or play for the same goal, to use your basketball analogy, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think, and then once again, that is so perfect how these agreements build on each other, because your agreement number 3 is role clarity.
Yes.
And how do you go towards the same goal if you don't know what your role is? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's my second most common complaint is, first, we don't know what we're going for. We don't know what the goal really is. And the second one is like, I don't know my part. What am I supposed to be doing in this? Yeah. And so role clarity is that, it's kind of that first thing that makes us secure, of like, you're completely unsafe or psychologically unsafe if you don't know your part, because then you're trying to guess, right? You're trying to add value. You're trying to maybe cover for other people, but if you don't know what's expected of you, you certainly can't get it right. And so, so defining that role clarity is big, and it's not easy as things change. You have to keep redefining it. And often it is a collaboration. Like coming to the table and I might say, here's what I think my role is. Here's what I'm planning to do. Here's how I see it. And then somebody else might come to the table and go like, oh, wait a minute. I thought that part that you just talked about was my part. Maybe we need to clarify that and talk through whose part should it be.
Right. Right. And who can take ownership for it so that it gets done.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like having a point guard under the basket, trying to get rebounds, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we'd never send a basketball team out, at least at the professional level, or even like, from a grade school level on. You'd never send somebody out on the court without telling them their position.
Exactly.
They have positions.
And so I would love to hear just a little bit of advice though on that, because as you mentioned, the roles keep changing, right? Especially if you're
Yes.
an entrepreneurial, fast growing business, the roles do keep changing. So it,
Yes, they do. Yeah. And I think of it very much as that if we back up and talk about the big picture for a moment, is the business journey. I think of it as kind of like the entrepreneurial journey. It starts with an idea and an entrepreneur doing everything themselves, or maybe they have a little bit of help from a few people, but they don't need to talk about what they're doing because it's all in their head and they're going to do it. So as they get that going and it turns into a business that actually has some legs, then entrepreneurs start to get some support, but they keep the most important roles for themselves. So they still don't need to talk all that much about what they're thinking about, how the structure should work, etc. Okay, but then as it grows more, again, the entrepreneur, it's not possible to do everything themselves, and this is really true for um, companies. How would I say it? Companies that have intrapreneurial things as well, right? And so as they grow, they have to structure things into functions, into kind of groups of tasks that make sense for operating the company. And as the business changes, those change, right? So maybe one of the simplest I could that's easy to talk about how things change fast is with technology. When I first started working with online businesses, online meant Google ads. Just, that was it.
Yeah.
You did Google ads. That was it. Now there's so many social platforms. And Google has so many different ways of advertising now. So it changes and the skills change. So you may have in the early days, you may have a sales department that's all about in-person sales and an advertising department that's about placing Google ads. But as you grow, it's like, okay, the sales department becomes online conversions plus in-person sales, right? Plus phone sales. And that all those changes have to get taken into account. Like we have to make them to have the business match what's really going on. And that does take some time to clarify. I think of it as like putting a puzzle together, right? And then the picture changes and you have to kind of rearrange the puzzle. It's like, oh, wait, now we need this new part of doing phone sales we didn't need before. How is that going to fit here?
And as you grow and as the economy and the industries grow, it's just constant
change.
Yeah. And which is why number 4 agreement is so important, the secure relationships, right? And really having that. Talk about that.
Yeah. So secure relationships, that people really understand that good teamwork, getting results is based on secure relationships. A secure relationship is not one where we're best friends and we go to movies and we know everything about each other's families. Although that's, that can be nice. So there's no problem with knowing all that. But a secure relationship is all about trusting our teammate to have our backs. Trusting that our teammates, when they make decisions and take actions that are in their interest, that they will think about how they impact other people, right? That somebody will, think about before criticizing me in a meeting, they'll think about, hey, wait a minute, we got the boss here. I'm not going to throw Annie under the bus because that is, then she won't trust me. Then we're going to have a relationship that's all about avoiding each other, right? And talk about the fastest way to shut down collaboration is when people don't trust each other.
Right.
Then we can't even talk about the right way to go. So we need people to be thinking about how they impact others and really take that into account. It's that simple. It's like, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy because you have to keep on two hats. You have to keep on the hat of like, I am moving forward to achieve a goal, right? I know I need to get my parts done, etc. Okay, but while I do it, I have to keep on my hat of like, but where's everybody else? Is this going to mess them up? Does this support them? If this were basketball, it's like, okay, I'm dribbling down the court, but I know I'm going to pass the ball. So I better keep track of like where my teammates are. So secure relationships are really about maintaining that level of trust and security. And when that breaks down, we get an environment that is psychologically unsafe. It's where people will no longer risk, right? If I think somebody's going to throw me under the bus, I am no longer going to share my mistakes. I'm no longer going to raise an issue of, I think I might not meet this deadline because I don't want to get criticized in a meeting. There could be a million reasons I'm going to miss a deadline. I might feel like none of them are my fault, but if I think I'm going to get blamed and judged, it's almost impossible to raise it.
Right. And so many great leaders know that from mistakes come some of the best ideas.
For sure.
Right.
For sure. Yes. And mistakes need to be built into business. Again, if I take it back to sports, my husband is a big tennis fan. And when we watch tennis, the vast majority of the points are human error, right? Unforced errors. Because we're human. It's okay. And occasionally there's a huge winner shot. That's amazing. But we have to know, we're going to make some errors. It's okay. We're human. Yeah. We're going to have more than enough great ideas, things that go well to make up for those.
Exactly. Okay. So we're going to move on to number 5, which is conscious agreements. So you're making agreements about these agreements.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes. We're making agreements that we can keep. Right? And that we are conscious of, meaning that I think about what I'm committing to because I know that other people are going to rely on me. And so the worst thing that I can do is commit to something I know I can't do, or that overcommits me. I think of overcommitment because I definitely was an overcommitter for a good amount of time in my career. I as a kind of one of my defense strategies is avoid and please. And so, so I would say yes to things, even if I meant no or maybe, just to take the pressure off in the moment, right? It's like, I don't want people to think I'm not a team player. Yeah, I'll do it. Later look at it and kind of go, there's no way I can do this. But instead of coming back to the table and saying, oops, I made a mistake, I need to talk about this. I'm not sure I can fit this in this week. Instead, I would, get delusional and think, well, I'll probably fit it in okay. Maybe it'll be all right. And then disappoint big time.
Yeah. Or burn out, right?
Exactly. Yes. Or burnout. Exactly. Yeah. And so the thing about conscious agreements is that when we start to really get in this habit of clarifying those agreements up front, of really talking about what is my part? Can I do it? How would I do it? Because when we think about and talk about how we're going to do something, we think about it more comprehensively. Right. Then we have to actually kind of imagine ourselves taking steps and think about what else is on my plate. What else might I need to do? And it's okay to renegotiate things because agreements are a process, not a promise. So if something comes onto the table that really is a bigger priority, well, then that's what it is. We're all going to need to get around that.
Right. I like that. Agreements are a process, not a promise.
Exactly. And there's all kinds of reasons you may need to come back and renegotiate.
Absolutely. daily sometimes, right?
Yes.
As business continues to change and as our
Absolutely.
word. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And yes, as things don't go as planned. I mean, it's kind of interesting also about like project planning, because we do need to plan projects. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's like we need the structure of a project plan is so that we actually have some starting agreements, because we can't make other agreements without the basics. But
Right.
then it's literally, the thing of like, okay, but as I'm building this out, oh wait, now I can see that this earlier agreement I made has to change.
Which is agreement number 6.
Yes,
Change,
exactly.
renegotiate, right?
Yes. Which is,
Mhm.
as soon as we can see that an agreement won't work out or has a high chance of not achieving the goal, we renegotiate.
Mhm.
It's so important. The the thing about uh, making changes in business is the time. How do you say it? It's like the earlier the better. The more you wait, the less options you have to fix it.
Mhm.
So we want to raise things as early as possible. Of like, hey, you know what? I'm 30% through the time on this project, but I can see I'm less than 10% of the way through it. I can already tell. Let's talk about, do I have a chance of making this on time? Right? Or do we need to like change the timeline right now while everybody down the line can adjust their schedule?
It's that ongoing communication is just the key, right? Yeah.
It is, it's key. And that
Mhm.
we all have to expect it, right? That this is business. That's how it works. So when somebody comes to us to renegotiate, we're not in a place of like, well, wait a minute, I'm not changing my side. We had a deal. You just need to stick with it.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
it's not about us. It's about looking at the goal again, looking at the bigger picture of like
Mhm.
what needs to happen for the business.
Right. The overarching strategy of the business and how all of that, every single person affects it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which takes us back to the people part and, agreement number 7, which is about creating this culture of excellence.
Yes. Yes. And a culture of excellence that's like all around habits and best practices. It's kind of like, how do we work in a way that we know that we automatically do the right thing for teamwork.
Mhm.
So a good example is the habit of raising problems early.
Mhm.
It's like we want people to not to feel so safe in an organization, and that it's just habitual of like, well, I wouldn't wait. That's just not an option here. It's just not how you do things.
Right.
So anytime I'm going to see a problem that impacts other people or impacts the outcome, I'm going to raise it right away and talk about how I see the problem. Talk about solutions that I can think of already.
Mhm.
That I think part of the reason people are reluctant to raise issues is because they feel like they'll be perceived as weak or as not being accountable. But that's not true when you also bring some ideas for solutions,
Yes.
because then people can see your intent right away.
Yes.
Like, look, I have a problem, but I'm bringing it now because we've got to solve it for the business. And I'm already thinking about what should we do here.
That
Here's
is it.
my ideas.
That is it. That is a growth mindset, right? And it's
Yes,
also just being so outcome focused that you are already thinking 3 steps ahead that there might be these solutions, right?
exactly. Exactly. Which is the thing that humans can do. That's
Yes.
what we're so good at. Right. So we want those to be more automatic.
Mhm.
I think of kind of some basics of self-leadership that we want to be automatic. We want people to get out of the habit of blame and self-blame. not only spoken out loud, but in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that to be really excellent in business, to get better and better results, we've got to get that part down.
Mm-hmm.
Because blame and self-blame, it stops you from thinking.
Yeah. And the self-blame, a lot of new leaders take that on, right?
Yes. Yes. And I think it's because I've thought about this a lot, because I'm a big self-blame person too. Like I've really struggled with that. And I think I passed it down to my kids too. They struggle with it. So we've got some perfectionism running in our family for sure. And I think that self-blame is all about the illusion of control.
Mm.
It's like this moment feels so bad, and I don't want to experience it again, that if I tell myself it's my fault and I could fix it so that I get it right next time, I won't have to feel this. And it is an illusion, because we're human. All kinds of things are going to happen that we feel bad about, right? That we feel like, oh, I wish that had gone differently. That's super painful. And the real thing we need is to have the confidence, have the strength to go through it and know that we'll be okay on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And self-blame is a way of cutting that off, of saying, no, it's not that I have to become a human who can endure, not getting results, who can endure something going wrong. We tell ourselves, that's not it. I just have to be better. I have to be better at the thing. And we are going to get better, but we're never going to be so much better that we don't have things go wrong.
Exactly. We are human beings.
We are human.
Exactly.
Yep. And I love the Michael Jordan quote that is, he took however many shots he took on the basket, and, was given the game-winning shot and missed it dozens and dozens of times, right? It's like, yeah, that's business too.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
Wins, but you're going to get some that don't win.
Right. And it's the process of learning and growing as a business executive.
100%.
Yeah. So talk about your core empowerment process. I really liked that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So the core empowerment process is all about when you get emotionally triggered, right? So let's say that you're working together with somebody on a project, and maybe they forget to share with you an important piece of information. And now you're going to be a bit stuck for how, can I meet this deadline? Can I get this working again? Okay. So when that happens, we are so programmed, so wired to go into self-protection, right? To go into a place of like, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. This person should have given me a heads up a long time ago. This now I go to a place of fear. Now I'm going to be messed up. Now I'm going to look bad. We go into kind of that spiral. And so to get ourselves out, we need to pause and regulate. But we have to like resolve those thoughts, that kind of thought train. We have to get this out of a place of judgment of that this situation is bad and wrong, and to a place of neutrality and kind of curiosity of like, this is interesting, different than I expected, but interesting. And the core process is how we get there, how we take something that we think is bad and wrong, that feels terrible, and we bring it into a place of, you know what, this is okay. I'm okay. And what can I learn from it? What could we, how could we do it from here? And it has 5 steps. So it's core, but we spell core with 2 C's at the beginning. And so the first C, it's like when you get triggered and you pause, you have to pause and regulate enough that you can think, right? If you're still spinning in your head, you can't do the core process yet. But once you calm enough, then the first thing you're going to think about is clarifying the facts of like, what's really going on here? What are we, first one, what are we going for? What was like the point of us working together on this project, right? What is the project? Okay, then looking at just the facts of what's, okay, so this person just gave me information that shifts the deadline. So what do I know and what do I don't know? Right? What does this really mean? Does it mean I'm definitely going to miss it? Or does it, it's like, it probably just means, hey, look, I have this many fewer days or whatnot. Okay, just facts. Then the second part is to choose my impact. And this is kind of the PowerPoint in the process of I'm not a victim in this. Like I can choose how I show up. I can, that is at least something that I do have control over. Well, maybe I don't have control over this change of deadline. I do have control over how I show up and how I relate to it. And so in that case, I may say to myself, you know what? I'm going to choose to show up in a place that is supportive of the whole team for a change.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I decide that, right? It's like, what impact do I want to bring? Okay, so that's the second C. The O is all about observing my thoughts and feelings. And this is the place of where we have to reconcile a little bit that like we still have thoughts and feelings. Like we're human, so we can't turn those off, but we can relate to them more in like kind of a scientist way of like, oh, how interesting. Like for myself, when somebody changes a deadline, it's like, oh, how interesting. I really feel like I'm going to fail now. Right? It's like, it might be, oh my gosh, I'm kind of worried. I thought I was set up to succeed, but with half the time that I might have now, I kind of feel like maybe I can't do it. Like just to observe that, just to be in a place of like, oh, I'm thinking that, and to do our best to label all that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I wish we'd teach kids early on in school is a rich emotional vocabulary, because the more you can label, the more it puts you here in the front of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then the R is all about release judgment, and this is key to moving forward in anything. It's kind of like you can't look at a situation and do your best problem solving if you're still thinking of it as bad and wrong. You just can't. So it's like, how are we going to let go of all that? So in my example of the changing timeline, it's like, I have to be letting go of this should not be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, why shouldn't it be happening? Like, this is business. Things change all the time. So, this is changing in this way, but I don't know, maybe it's going to lead to us learning how to do it differently next time and having a whole breakthrough on a process. Right? Yeah. Maybe this is my opportunity as a leader to learn how to work people better under stress. Right? It's like, we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Right.
And so we need to let go of all those judgments that it should be different. And the way that I find that it's the easiest to do that is to let it go and go into compassion of like, oh my God, it's so hard to be on a project when people change timelines. Right? Like it just is.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no. Like, and we're all human. And this part is hard. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can feel that and get through it and move on.
Right. And most likely meet that timeline and be fine.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And yep. And then the E is all about engage my secure self, right? That's, be in a place of, again, enough confidence of knowing I will get through this and be fine. I'm good. So I can drop all of that self-protective stuff and any kind of judgments and be in a place of, let's think about what to do from here.
Yeah. Annie, you're so right. I mean, this is actually a powerful process and powerful things for kids to think about. Yeah. I think your next book might be the people part for teenagers, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
It's hard. I mean, I will also say that I noticed that high achievers, which we're often, which most of the time is what we're working with in business. Frankly, people that are successful in business are really high achievers. Because they're so good at achieving, it's actually feels worse to them when things don't go well.
Yeah.
It's such a contrast. And we need to learn how to work through that because we're wired for it to feel bad. Like humans are, we are, how would I say, to continue as a species did not require us to be happy. That was not a part of it. It was
interesting.
Yeah. It was to survive. It was to, get a mate. And
create,
procreate, protect your babies.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things it was about, but, having our well-being was not one of them. And yet to work well together today, we have to have our well-being. And we should learn that as kids, that our well-being has to be up to us because we're wired to detect danger in a way that doesn't exist anymore for most of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about it that way. One of my mottos has always been, in raising my kids at least, is prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child.
Exactly.
Teaching them to be resilient when failure comes.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Not giving them a trophy for every loss and win, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So that creates resilience then, right? They know how to handle that stuff.
100%.
As adults.
It's the most important part.
Yeah.
At USM, the instructors there had a saying that the worst preparation for adulthood is a perfect childhood.
Yeah. Right? It's so true. Then you don't know how to handle anything, Yeah.
And you're unprepared. It's too devastating when something goes badly, if it's never gone badly before.
Yeah. So talk about this, I love the way that you took this with your creating a vision and calling it from A to V.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm glad you like that part for sure. Yeah. We talk about the journey, going from point A to point V, but for business, I think it's so easy to think about it as V, and V is your vision state. Because that's what business is about, right? We want to get somewhere, achieve something in the future. So the journey from A to V, business is the journey, right? It's we do want to get there, but by the way, when we get closer to V, we just get a new V. So it's the idea that you're always on a journey and that the straight path is just never available. Yeah. It's if it were, I think business wouldn't even be fun. So it's it's just not. It's going to be full of ups and downs and twists and turns. And the thing that we're wanting to do as we go from A to V is just get better and better at what we do. And I think of it, like sports, the pros are better than the amateurs. They've practiced a lot.
Right. They created a plan to make that happen.
Exactly. Yes.
Is that part of the visionary master plan then as well?
Yes. So the visionary master plan. So if you have A to V, I think of V as being several years out, like 3 to 5 years. It's kind of like, where do we really want to be, and what does it look like? As much as we know right now, right?
Mhm.
And knowing it could change. Because again, like, I had clients that just couldn't imagine that Facebook was ever going to be like this giant platform. And so, so they plan their future on Google, and then came along Facebook.
Yeah.
So, so things will change, but you want this sense of what does it look like when we've really won? So, so where do we really want to get to in the future? And that could be like, if you're a sports team, it could be we want to win the national championship. If you're a business, it could be, we want to be the leader in providing these kinds of services. It could be a reputation. We want to be known for. I want to be known for, really having a focus on leadership and team development that's people based, right? So yeah. Okay, so you have your vision state that's farther out, but then the visionary master plan is all about what are we doing about it now in the next 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like now? Because your V state is less concrete, it's more visionary, but your plan, your 1 year or 18-month plan, that is concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be concrete enough that you can make a plan to it, right? It can't just be open-ended, like like we want to introduce a new product line, but we'll figure out when that should be. It's like, no, we actually have to pick a timeline. We can change it, but we've got to pick it so that we can start planning and figure out, is it doable? Is it not doable?
Right. So it's really actionable steps to create that vision.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So I have so many more things for you. I mean, I could go on for a while, and I know we only have like 3 minutes left. There might have to be like a, post-launch interview.
Absolutely.
But tell me, are there things, I mean, I had written down the emotional endurance zone, ACE teamwork, the gap plus the impact, and there were so many things I talked about, but is there one other big point that you want to get across to an audience as you are launching this book?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's to get better at renegotiating, because I find that when and sometimes that may come in the form of like feedback, right? So one of the complaints that lots of people have is like, well, how do I talk to somebody when it's not going well, when a project's not going well, or their performance isn't going well? And that is, it's hard for people, and they generally come approach it from a place of, well, I have to tell them that they're bad and wrong, and I don't really know how to do that. And so it's I would love for people to come away with, no, that's not what you're telling them. It's like, what we're talking about here is, how are we going to get the outcome? And this, this part of it, whether it's your performance or just, something going wrong in the project or whatnot, that we have to resolve that to get the outcome. And so when you think of it that way, then you can create a narrative in your head of like, well, this is just going as it's going, but let me lay out like what we were thinking was going to happen, what changed, right? So what's happening now? And then to talk about, what do we have to do differently to get the outcome? It's just so much easier. If instead of talking to somebody about, let me give an example. Something common, I think, is people not prioritizing well. That's maybe a thing, right? Of like, or maybe not being able to organize the things on their plate well enough. I feel like that's something that humans struggle with, frankly. Okay, so And if you're not organizing your plate well enough, and I come to you and I say, well, this isn't, this part isn't, you're not organizing your plate, and you need to do better. Okay. Then the other person's going to be like, well, I'm organizing it just fine. Why do I need to do better? And by the way, I'm doing it the best I can. I can't do it any differently. So you have it wrong. I'm organizing my plate fine. And then leaders get stuck, right? They're like, well, geez, I don't know what to say now. And the thing is, it's not about organizing their plate. That's the gap. It's not the impact. So what you want to come to it is with, hey, okay, so we are, we're running this project with a pretty tight deadline. Okay. We need people to stay on task for the priority so that the people that are downstream from you get the part of the project that they need when they need it.
Mm-hmm.
So when your plate isn't organized, what that's causing is that you're missing handing it off at the right time. And when that handoff gets messed up, then those people can't deliver on time. And suddenly our launch is stretched out another week. I'm trying to give like a simple example here.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about somebody's behavior that is about stretching out a timeline a week, which is expensive in business, or 2 weeks or whatnot, right? So that's what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to solve for the handoffs. We have a suspicion that it's because this person can't organize their plate. But we want to be talking about what's going on here, because it's the impact we need to solve. And that's when then people can come back to the table with, oh, okay, so I am having trouble organizing, or I'm not. This is the real issue with me handing it off on time. But we actually get to talk about the real issue.
Right.
And so to really think about when you're approaching something, not focusing on the part that you think is the problem, to focus on the ultimate impact. So that's a big thing to take away, I think.
Yes. And so much communicate and renegotiate.
Yes.
Communicate and renegotiate.
Yes.
And then you achieve your desired outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes I talk about what's changed is my thinking, meaning like I may negotiate an agreement and then come back the next day and say, you know what, I was thinking about this last night and laying out in my head how all this would go together. And I think maybe we need to re-examine, talk about it again, look at this part. That's okay.
It is okay. Yeah. It is okay to re-examine.
Yes, it is.
It's okay to shift. It's okay to re-clarify, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we want to, because people, when they step away from the agreement, they do think about it more.
Mm-hmm.
And we want people's thinking. That's the value.
Yeah. That happens to me at about 3 a.m. I wake up thinking about things.
Exactly.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
All right. See you.
Okay. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.